Imagine a world transformed by the power of giving, where every act of kindness sparks another. These are the champions who dedicate their lives to change. Together, they are paying it forward. Champions of change. Paying it forward. Join us and be part of the movement. Here on the Achievement Channel.
Welcome to Champions of Change on the Achievement Channel, where we celebrate leaders and innovators, creating impactful change in our world. Today, we're privileged to host an exceptional guest, Pearl Uzokwe. With over 2 decades of global leadership and board experience, Pearl is a driving force for sustainable development, especially on the continent. As the Director of Africa Forward at Catalyst 2030, she leads initiatives empowering social entrepreneurs and innovators in Africa to achieve the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Let's get started. I'm your host, Pamela Ekbo.
Champions of Change. Paying it forward. Join us and be part of the movement.
Welcome, Pearl, to Champions of Change. Great to have you here.
I'm really excited to be here.
Fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So I'm excited about this conversation we're about to have. You have worked in the social impact space for over 20 years. You wear many, many hats. You are a girl child advocate. You are a social justice advocate. You are a social entrepreneur and a social innovation advocate. What has inspired you to stay on this path, and what inspired you to actually get into this?
I love how you've basically very nicely articulated it. I'm literally realizing there's so many S's as well in the things that I've basically followed. Honestly, the way I describe it is that I don't think I actually had a choice when it comes to being on this pathway. I feel like this pathway chose me even before I knew what it was, even before I could articulate it. And just in terms of what I have done, my story started as a lawyer, and I'm not sure you know that. So I started as a lawyer, as a solicitor in the UK. But you see, even at that point, I basically found myself in the international development space. And how did this happen? So looking for work as a lawyer, a lot of people went into law firms, and that was the traditional pathway. And the reason I say that this chose me was that, and somehow in the process of finding this first very important job, you know how stressful it is to find that first one, I came upon an organization that was doing international development work across the world, the Crown Agent in the UK, and they basically turned out to be the in-house legal department for UK's DFID, which is the Department for International Development, doing all the work supporting the UK's international development world across the world. And I was blown away, because as much as I loved the legal work that I was doing and felt I could do it, it was just having this additional dimension where you were supporting work across the world. I thought, this is fascinating. I loved that I could be working out of the UK, but then supporting work in my home country and countries in the global south who were, struggling in different areas. And so that really fired me up, and started the journey. And it's almost like, once you know what it's like, once you get a taste of that, you can't stop.
That's
honestly.
That's
and you
true.
see the same fire in the eyes of people who like this. Sometimes I'm just like, Pearl, stay away, but it just you can't. If it's your thing, if you're passionate about it, even without articulating it, you have people saying, I know you like this, I see that this fires you up. And you realize that honestly, that's really that wonderful, nice comfort zone of finding work that hopefully pays you and also, gets to your essence and your core. And I know there's a wonderful quote that somebody gave me once where it says, the things that excite you are not random, they're connected to your purpose. And I think when it comes to career and the choice that I've taken, it really resonates, because there's always a difference. And believe me, I've tried. I've gone down pathways which on paper look great, financially looks great. I literally haven't been able to survive. And it just brings me back again to this compass north.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I love how you said that
Yeah.
this found you.
Yeah.
Because I know you personally, and I know the passion that you have for
Thank
the
you.
development work.
Thank you.
So right now you are the programs director for Africa Forward.
Yes.
Which is part of an initiative of Catalyst 2030. You
Mm-hmm.
have a huge remit, which is to basically encourage social entrepreneurs and innovators
Yes.
to create meaningful impact and sustainability in the continent, in line with the UN Development Goals, SDG goals.
Yes.
So can you just explain to us what that looks like practically?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you've raised it, and even hearing it again, you're reminded of like how ambitious a project it is. But honestly, Pamela, I've reached the point where I can't do things I don't believe in,
Right.
and that's the starting point. And let me just take a step back, right? In terms of things that I've done, having done the work in the global north and worked in the UK, and deciding to put my money where my mouth was and come back to Nigeria and work on the continent. One of the things that I realize and I really want for this continent is that we develop in a way that's sustainable.
Yes.
And I thank God for the portfolios that I've had looking at sustainability and really coming to understand it. And what that did for me was just greater appreciation for the private sector and the work that it does, greater appreciation for just ways of intervening when it comes to social impact that ensures you're not constantly dependent on funding. Which,
yes.
yes, you can start, but I want nothing more for this continent to develop in a way that ensures that they are able to do this and stand on their own 2 feet. Now, working with the private sector, I know you've seen these figures because you've done incredible work in this space. Whether we like it or not, on the African continent, private sector is, figures will vary, but for Nigeria, over 90% of our GDP comes from the private sector. And you see that they're able to move things along. And one thing that gives me a cause for excitement is how entrepreneurial as a continent we are. And it's not just the men, it's women. And you touched on it, but when it comes to gender issues, sign me up. And so looking at the data, because you've got to go back to the data, and seeing what it's done for gender equity, social entrepreneurs and innovators that are women are doing incredible things. The data is saying it's at least 40%. And so that encourages me. It excites me. You don't have that even in the private sector. And getting into this space and what we're doing, we're just saying, listen, we recognize that there's an ecosystem that needs support for social entrepreneurs and innovators. And for those who don't know what that is, it's essentially people who are doing good and doing well. So they're running businesses that are viable and that they're solving social problems at the same time. And so for me, it's like, it's a killer combination. So make sure, because ultimately, what is business? You're solving somebody's problem. You've got to solve a problem. If you're not solving a problem, people are not buying it, right? And so there's an extra dimension with social entrepreneurs and innovation is how do we do this better such that we're solving these, there's so many social problems. That's where the UN's SDGs come from. We have 17 of them. It's kind of like with any country, take your pick. Which one do you want to solve and do it in a way that is, sustainable? And that's why Catalyst comes in. And I was excited by the prospect because it was doing something a bit different to what I'd seen some other organizations do. And the word that I use is that they're trying to support social entrepreneurs and innovators in a way that's unselfish. It's not even a real word, but for me, I just say they're saying, you know what? This ecosystem needs support. How do we do it in a way that really we're bringing about systemic change? So as well as you're doing your programmatic work and interventions, it's almost like we know better, let's do better. And I'll break it down a little bit. Like, how can we support this ecosystem in a way that will hopefully move the marker and help everyone eventually? It may not happen as quickly as you wanted to, but we know that this task is huge and we're willing to try and bring together the stakeholders to do it. And so a bit of history about Catalyst 2030. Sometimes I'm blown about how quickly they've developed in a short period of time. And so you had a couple of really key players in the social innovation and entrepreneurial space. So we had World Economic Forum's Schwab Foundation, Skoll Foundation, EcoRing Green, and our wonderful Ashoka from the continent. These are people who are very passionate about social entrepreneurship and innovation. On the sidelines of Davos in 2019, as you do, sitting in this space where you have, as you know, a lot of, I guess, powerful individuals from the global north, the thinking was around how do we accelerate support for the global south using this access? How do we move things along? The SDGs 2030 is almost here. And so they decided we're going to combine forces, the four of them, and just build out an ecosystem of support for social entrepreneurs right across the world, such that they're cross-pollinating, they're supporting each other. We're helping with leveraging, whether it's the financing, it's the policy reforms, whatever it is, that will help each region in a way that's going to be fit for purpose.
Right.
So one thing they very quickly recognize is they can't be prescriptive from their vantage position and say, I'm sitting in, for example, Switzerland for Schwab, and I will tell you exactly how to operate in Africa.
Right.
And that's what attracted me. So with my role, Africa Forward is the very first Africa's regional initiative saying, let's support social entrepreneurs and innovators. And what's different about this is we've now said, you want to support them, how are we going to do this? What are we prioritizing in terms of, because it's a wide range. We went back and we co-create with the social innovators and entrepreneurs. And Pamela, this might sound basic, but honestly, how many times have you seen people say, I have a solution to a problem, but they're not asking the people who actually need it, does this work? Is this making sense?
Right.
You know? And so that was very attractive to me with the Catalyst model. And if you look at it, we had, when it started off this is 2019, had just a handful of innovators and entrepreneurs. Right now we have over 5,000 in the ecosystem. Africa has over 1,000. And it meant that when it came to saying we want a strategy, we want to support you, we went back again to these innovators, got physical gatherings, ideated, people went back and forth, what do you want us to prioritize? And that's how we landed at what we were going to focus on.
Fantastic.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And I love the fact that, you know, you are the African leading the Africa Forward. That's so important.
I love that you've mentioned that, because that was very much the foundation. It was Africa, Africans for Africa. And if you look at it, the team is spread across Africa. When it comes to hiring, it's a remote setup, but it's just, we're very particular about people having lived experiences. So it's, you don't throw a baby away with bathwater, because there's so much to learn from this wonderful gathering of innovators across the world. But it's that there's so much humility around. Ask the people in those spaces how they want this done.
Exactly.
And so for Africa and for Africa Forward, we're very focused on building out the ecosystem as it concerns data, as it concerns policy reform.
And
as
that
it concerns,
the data informs the policy reform,
absolutely. So you get it, because you're in this space, because there's just a dearth of credible data, timely data that's really, you know, that is useful. And so if what I mean by co-creating is, before you even create another paper on something, or you know, whatever data set or mapping you want to do, it's, you have your idea, you go back again to these innovators and go, we're doing this, does this make sense? Would you like to see something else? And it's been very humbling, actually. So you just realize, this is not I don't play in this field every day. I am an enabler for your hopeful success, but it's constantly going back and asking them. And so that's how we arrived at ecosystem development, job creation is a big part of it, and sustainable financing. It came from them.
Awesome. We'll take a quick break right now, and when we come back, we'll continue this incredible conversation with Pearl.
Champions of change. Paying it forward. Join us and be part of the movement.
Eloquence focuses attention on the message and the audience.
I find it very interesting, exciting, sympathetic.
It was very beneficial.
Definitely would learn a lot, a whole lot.
Thank you. The delivery was second to none.
Speak with power.
Speak with power.
Speak with power.
Champions of change. Paying it forward. Join us and be part of the movement.
Welcome back to Champions of Change. Just before the break, we've been talking to Pearl about her wonderful work that she's doing in the social impact space and the wave she's making with Africa Forward. So Pearl, can you just elaborate if you have any success stories from just working with social entrepreneurs in the continent?
Absolutely. What again, I will keep saying is it's been wonderful to just see a different approach to basically working, where first of all there has to be a lot of thinking through and strategizing, so that, because it's very easy to jump into, let's start working and implementing, and what I've realized is that it also leads to short-termism. But because the work that we're looking to do is really about systemic change, I've learned so much as well about what it involves, the amount of time that it takes to get the stakeholders aligned. And an example that really is really fresh and exciting for me is on the policy reform work. And so if I gave an example, so we want to work right across sub-Saharan Africa. And one of the things we're looking to do is ensure that when you say policy reform, we want the different governments in the various African countries to understand what social entrepreneurship and innovation means, and ensure that there's legislative framework to support them. And what that means, for example, is you now have social entrepreneurship as a vehicle that can be registered in countries separate from charities and separate from private private and public companies, because you want them to have different tax treatments, for example. You want them to be able to make a profit as well as have these, whether we call them charitable objectives or social objectives. And that some African countries have it, but we have less than 10 in all of 10 African countries with legislation that supports. Now, the kind of thinking we've had to do is to sit down and think, how can we basically find stakeholders who are aligned that will help us move this along, because that's the one thing we've learned. You're not going to do this alone. The kind of stakeholders have identified the African Union, who already have a social solidarity strategy around this. And the beauty of that is they're going to work, when it's passed, it's right across Africa. It now becomes for the African countries to implement it one-on-one. So we basically hosted a roundtable in collaboration with the Schwab Foundations, the World Economic Forum's Schwab Foundation. You know how they have a wonderful support and network of organizations who are passionate about social entrepreneurship. We have the AU, we had the International Labour Organization, and then we've gone into South Africa as a starting point, because you might know the G20 is moving from Brazil to South Africa. Why is this a systemic change piece? Because South Africa already has a green paper on social, the social and solidarity economy. If you have that kind of movement in a country, we brought together various stakeholders to start saying, look, this is what we want to do. We have a 1-year time frame. Let's ensure that we pass policy that we can use as a proof of concept. Now, this is, you've gone from proof of concept of projects in little localities to now saying a country is going to pass legislation that will do this, that people can now have, different countries and governments can learn from. And so pulling that ground table together was really a labor of love. The different parties coming together, Africa Forward and the EU and ILO and the government of South Africa. And so this has kickstarted, hopefully, wonderful conversations that will get us to the point where there's legislation that can now be replicated. So that's why I mean the systemic change pieces take time, but you definitely want people who understand it and who are aligned and who can see the big picture. That when it comes through, this is not one program. This is the entire country is going to benefit from that. All the social innovators and entrepreneurs will benefit from legislation that now recognizes them, that gives them tax incentives, that ensures that they can really sustainably start to thrive as businesses in a way that they didn't before.
That's tremendous. It sounds like a lot of hard work.
It is a lot of, it takes time. Yeah.
But it will create a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
Once you get that sorted.
Absolutely.
Great.
And, job creation is always an exciting one.
Absolutely,
it's under wraps, but there are people that we're absolutely working with, and again, in a way to ensure that you're not just training people for the sake of training. For example, it's what are the linkages? Are they relevant jobs? Are you ensuring that it's in line with what is required? Jobs of the future. So again, it's like sitting down, doing the hard graft of understanding what gaps there are, revalidating it with people who are in the field. For example, the private sector partners that you have, and ensuring that you sit down with as many, solid stakeholders as possible to ensure that the interventions are far-reaching and really impactful.
That's great. That's great. So I want to bring it back to Nigeria.
Please.
It's our country. In terms of the work that you do, I mean, youth unemployment is a big thing right now in this country, and in creating sustainable solutions that will stem the Jackpot syndrome that we're seeing. What are you doing to help, what is Africa Forward's sort of thought process in solving that problem. What are some of the critical issues? Obviously, youth unemployment is one, and how can we create a more conducive ecosystem in this country that will inform change?
No, it's a loaded question because honestly, being in a position where you're also seeing how things work in other African countries, it gives you a chance to sort of compare and contrast. And what I will honestly say, Pamela, is almost like an organization. To see the kind of impact that you want, you need the intention has to start from the top. And I will leave it there, but that is that if you think about it, it's got to start from the top. And so in countries that I'm able to look at and compare, it's been amazing to see how much intentionality has been put behind creating an ecosystem that supports businesses, for example, that ensures that they're thriving, that ensures that, you know, they have recourse, they are not overburdened, they're given moratoriums with loans and things of that nature, and essentially just allowed to thrive, for example, in certain circumstances. Is it that we prevent importation in certain industries to support the local ones? And so if I bring it back to the unemployment discussion for our country, I mean, I wouldn't even belabor the point around the numbers. We know what the urgency around unemployment is for young people. For the country, Nigeria specifically, our thinking is just to how do we ensure that we don't have the luxury of time? How do we ensure that we're creating building out young people such that they're employers of labor, because we don't have enough jobs certainly to go around, most definitely with the number of people. And so anything that we're going to be, all the plans that we have are certainly tied around holistically developing them such that once they leave, they're able to employ people, and then there's the multiplier effect. And so it's always looking at stakeholders from whether it's government or private sector players who have the reach to do it. And there are things in the works for next year that I'm going to keep under wraps for now. But again, like I said, this is us getting into programmatic and really kicking off with it from next year. Fantastic. And ensuring that it's done in a way that, you're multiplying the effect of individuals that you have trained, for example.
Great. I'm looking forward to seeing what those things will be.
Thank you.
So you have been on the board of you're on the board of the Private Sector Advisory Group. You're on the Malala Fund board. You were working as the executive director for Sahara Group for many, many years. So you have a wide berth of experience. I would like to talk about the Malala Fund because that, I think, is a tremendous organization working towards advocating for girls to have basic free education till at least they're 12, and also trying to reverse the effects of out-of-school girls, particularly in the northern part of Nigeria. What have you seen as that has been a success with that Malala Fund being in Nigeria? And what are you excited about?
Oh no, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, bringing that particular issue, because again, I think it helps me with just articulating this systemic change pieces that we talk about that sometimes take a while, but hopefully the impact is far-reaching. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to talk about one example from another country and show you how that also is a model that would love to see replicated in other places. So the Malala Fund, the mission, the vision is really simple: to get to the point where literally girls have 12 years of free, good quality education. And it's been interesting to see. It's just been a 10-year journey, but in that time, it's a really tough job in the sense that you're picking the countries with the most out-of-school girls. You're dealing with political issues. You're dealing with just the cost of being, and cultural issues as well, because it's not just putting money in certain places. You've got to ensure that the mindset as well is understanding why this is a good thing, and you have stakeholders in key places that support the mission. And so Pakistan is one of the countries that we operate out of. And in terms of the successes that we've seen there, it's been sitting down and basically working not just as a fund itself, but working with the government of Pakistan. And we introduced a STEAM program where it was like, we want to ensure that these girls are being built and holistically supported for jobs of the future. It wasn't enough.
Sorry to interrupt, could you just explain what STEAM is for
absolutely.
People who don't?
Thank you. So STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And so it's just recognizing these are areas, because identifying areas that sometimes we find that girls aren't as represented in. but are as well very cognizant of the fact that these are these subject areas are going to be real feeders for the jobs of the future, whether it's the fourth industrial revolution and things that we're seeing in the other parts of the world. We're looking to support those girls in the global south who we know have the capacity, they just haven't been given the opportunity.
Sure.
All right, so STEAM programs. We sat down with the government of Pakistan, realizing that you can't say you want to teach STEAM programmatically if the teachers aren't supported. And so MOUs were entered into with the government of Pakistan such that the teacher training colleges were engaged, the teachers are supported and funded, the government is matching it, you're picking out entire, in a sense, imagine states or localities where all the girls are now basically being trained with curriculum being adjusted. That is far-reaching, exactly, and long-term here, such that you hope to end up with girls who come out of the system and their eyes are just open. I always tell people, with a lot of young people, you just need to light that spark. And so for Nigeria, again, we're constantly working to look at ways in which we can ensure that states are able to provide girls with free education. And it takes time because it's policy work, right? So you can't do it without ensuring that you have the budget as well to fund it. And Nigeria and our federal system as well is very unique, but it's been really exciting to see wins in states like Kaduna States, where, for example, we've been able to achieve success there. And you're ensuring that for the first 12 years, education is guaranteed to be free. And then, as with all things, you know that there'll be other things by the side that can pop up. So one of the things that we're constantly battling is hidden fees. So in places where they say it's free, but then you've got to pay for X, Y, Z, other additional things. And so the work is constantly ongoing to keep educating. So we're now building together, I would say, a coalition of those who are aligned in terms of our goals, getting lots of support from people in government, and getting to the point where you also want to have clear budgetary lines and an understanding that you can't achieve these ambitious goals without the absolute funding and the continuity around that, looking at best practice across the world. And of course, as you do these big change pieces, programmatic has to carry on. So there are a myriad of partners that we work with and have worked with in the country, and the number runs into millions of dollars that have been invested in the time that we've been here, working with people who, in the interim, essentially, how can we support girls? With those providing safe havens for girls in different parts of the country, especially, like you said, in the northern parts of the country. So whilst there was COVID, for example, radio programming happened such that it actually got lots of parents involved because they could then hear what the girls were learning and wanted to be a part of it. But just a little snapshot of some of the work done. Exciting.
I'm looking forward to seeing how it unfolds in the years to go by. Finally, last but not the least, because we could go forever.
Absolutely.
Because I wanted to ask you to look into that camera and tell people who want to go through the same path that you've been through in terms of social development space, who are excited about social change, what they can do to get into this space, and what kind of encouragement you can give them, basically.
You just got to follow your heart, honestly. I think some of the most, and that's why this, I keep saying it's like a force. It's beyond you, really. I would say, first of all, make sure that your heart is in it. If you find something that fires you up, that upsets you, I think you channel it towards, what can we do about this? How can we make this better? And I find that different skill sets can still be basically deployed into the social impact space. So you have people who are like myself, who are lawyers, people who are in the finance space, who've come in and are supporting organizations in this space as well. So I would say, if you're coming in fresh, don't be afraid to ask for experience and to volunteer, to learn and understand what it takes. If you're starting off your journey and you're still in school, then be even more intentional. Find out a bit more about what courses will lead you into the social development, social impact, international development space. And just go for it. We need people who have lived experience in this part of the world to come in and ensure that their voices are heard. It's absolutely relevant. I would say, honestly, the sky's your limits. Just follow your heart. Follow your heart.
That's excellent advice. Thank you so much, Pearl. It's been amazing to have you here. And I hope you'll come back again and we'll continue this conversation.
Anytime, any day. Obviously, see, I can talk about this forever.
Yes,
so
for days.
thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Pearl for sharing her invaluable insights and inspiring us with her journey of purpose-driven leadership. Pearl's story reminds us that real change begins when we align our talents and passions with a commitment to make a difference. I am Pamela Igbo. This has been Champions of Change on the Achievement Channel from the School of Eloquence. Join us next time for more stories of transformation and impact. Bye for now.